Welcome to the Wing Life Podcast, where we talk about wing foiling and the lifestyles of those who enjoy this great sport. All right, guys. Number 2. Thanks for coming back. Thanks for joining us. So our overview of our first episode in the Wing Life show is don't be afraid to get out there. Don't be afraid to try something new, and don't be afraid to take some lessons. I think that's the overview of our first one. What are we going to talk about this week, guys?
Triple backflips. You're ready. No.
Yeah, go try it. Realize you are not ready, and take a step back. So now let's talk about the gear.
Yeah, let's talk about kind of the putting all the package together, and then the next steps into living your best life.
Beautiful. All right, where do we start? I'm brand new. I run down to the beach. I'm super stoked. Like, what do we think our first things are?
Take a huge loan out. Just kidding. Sorry, I have issues. Okay, first step would be make sure we spoke about it. Connect with your community, and if you can talk to somebody who's wing foiling, talk to them, get that information, learn it. You're probably connected with some people now. Maybe there's a shop. Now it's picking the right gear. Do your research, talk to people, ask questions. This industry is special. People are special in this industry. They want to help. It's different. And the more you can learn about yourself and the right conditions in your area, if you live in Hawaii and it's blowing 40 knots and you live in Florida and it's blowing 15 on average, it's a big difference in gear. And so learn that and get that knowledge, and you won't know, but people will help you to guide you there. And obviously we're all here to help. But that's the first thing I would say in starting that journey into getting my equipment. Now, I would say, you can buy the best and brand new, all that kind of stuff, but you also can just talk to the locals and kind of get your hands on some stuff and get started and just start putting your time in and putting your gear together and so on. But that would be the general start.
Yeah, I would say, talk to as many people as possible, because often you will hear that everybody has a different kind of opinion. And so now, that you might get confused, but if you try to collect as much feedback as you can, you're going to start seeing some common points along those lines. But ultimately, I would say it's going to be a struggle to learn. So there is not a piece of equipment that's going to make it a breeze to learn. And so when you get on a setup, whatever the setup is, if you are struggling, before blaming, I have the wrong equipment, put in the time. You might have the completely wrong equipment. That's true. But if you talk to people, often they might be able to help you with that or figure it out right away. But if you are not that far off the perfect setup for you and you are struggling, it's just the process. So I would say don't, overthink it. Get some gear. That's people are saying it's good. It's good for beginners, either through your local shop or through used gear from local riders around where you are. And yeah, just embrace the process for sure.
That's a really good point, actually, Gwen. Community-based gear purchases is a good idea, because there's a lot of communities that'll ride a specific brand, and therefore reselling is easier, purchasing is easier, and you also have a lot more feedback in that community based on whatever brand they chose to ride and adapt to. So sometimes it does make the learning a little bit easier, because you'll be able to ask and say, hey, what specific foil did you find was the easiest for me? What size of wing did you use? Where did you put your hands? I think all of that is crucial. And then if you choose to buy something new, or you can do some community swapping, which does definitely help keep the cost down. Rather than if you're the unique rider in that area and nobody else wants to get into that brand for a particular reason, it might make things a little bit more challenging. And setting up your gear, you might not know as well or be as easy as for you to set up your kit.
Yeah, I think, I mean, you guys are spot on. I would say if there's one essential item, I would say I wish everybody could have in the beginning, it'd be like a jet ski support, right? Because you're going to make that lesson easier, make that learning curve easier. But I would say, a good general, I would say, big picture look is, there's a ton of foils out there. There's a ton of wings out there. There's a ton of gear out there. And in general, it's all kind of doing the same thing. A wing is to pull or generate power with wind, and then the foil's trying to get up on foil like and fly. So they all kind of do the same thing. So, I agree with the concept of like just getting stuff. I would say that I think Gwen said it the best, and that's as much as you can ask and get information, because every area is different. And I truly believe that your area is going to be the most giving to you as far as and if you're that sole person that's in an area that has nothing around you and you're the lone person to give it a go, there's shops online, shops everywhere that you can talk to, and people like us who are happy to help. And that will help you as best as possible. But in reality, you're going to go through the same struggle everybody goes through. And that's, I got to set up, and too small, too big, who knows, the conditions are too much, too little, currents too strong. And that's the process. And I think, even in the first episode here, it's just get out and get it started and just try, and you're going to start to learn it. I think you're your best coach, and your best information is when you slowly start going through it yourself and learning. But hopefully we can eliminate a little bit of that struggle.
Yes, and eliminating that kind of struggle with getting the right equipment or setting up the equipment. Has there been any tips or feedback that you guys have received over the years as to what makes setting up a foil or setting up the wing the easiest?
So, I mean, I feel like one of the first thing, usually putting the foil together, the screws usually only go one place. However, there is a brand that I'm not going to mention it, but has a stabilizer that can go both ways. And even recently, within the last few months, I didn't know that. So I put the stabilizer in the wrong position, upside down. And I was giving a lesson, and I was like, why can I not ride right now? It was on my setup. So it's possible that sometimes a foil screws can go different, but most of the time I would say, okay, screws are going to be it's going to be pretty straightforward. Now, once you have your foil together and you are, ready to mount it to your board, the mast position is a common question. I would say, as a general rule, put it in the middle, start like that, and you go from there. In my opinion, the mast position is not a massive deal, because you can move your feet, and it would have essentially the same impact as moving your mast. So let's say you move your mast 2 inches back. If you would move your feet 2 inches on the board, you can achieve pretty much the same result. The only reason you would need to move the mast in a different position is if you are at the end of range of what you can do with your feet on the board. Let's say you are all the way forward on the pad, or you are really digging in the nose, but that's where you need to be for to be right on the foil. Then yes, you have to move the foil back. But again, it's kind of don't really overthink it. Don't let that stop you. Put it in the middle, go out there, put in the time. At first, the foil is going to take off. You're going to fall. It's not the mast position. It's because you are still trying to figure it out. So that would be general rule. And then again, if you have somebody local that can help you, they saw you ride, they saw you take off, and you're having issues, maybe they're going to be able to say, okay, maybe you should move your mast back, or you should move your mast forward. But essentially, mast back is going to help you keeping the board, the nose down. If you have too much lift, you put your mast back, it's going to fix that. If you don't have enough lift, you are trying to take off, it's not taking off, move your mast forward. But a common mistake with beginners is we want to try to take off as soon as possible. So we are cranking on that back foot, and that's kind of like stopping you, because now you are like plowing. It's like a plane. If you are trying to take off with the plane, you have no speed. You are already trying to take off. No, you need to build up speed before you try, taking off. So often I don't like to put the mast too forward for beginners, because they tend to really crank on the back foot, and that's actually stopping them from picking up speed. But I would say mast position, that's about it. Start in the middle. Wing, a common mistake would be maybe not to inflate it enough, because it's like you want to keep your wing so nice, you are scared to like that it's gonna blow up or something. And usually there is a recommended pressure that's written on the wing. Pump to at least that. Personally, I put it usually like 1 psi over. I'm not recommending you do that, because if it blows up, you're gonna say it's my fault. But usually wings, if it says like 8 psi, whatever, you could probably pump it to 10. It won't blow up. They have a safe margin. But a wing that's not inflated enough is not going to give you enough, as much power as you could have. It's going to be maybe softer, so it's going to kind of like bleed power when you are like cranking, when you're pulling on your back end. So make sure you pump your wing enough, and then I think you should be pretty good to go in the water.
Yeah, I was just going to say, for a general visual for somebody that's listening in, I would say, picture an airplane, right? So like you have a hydrofoil, it's an airplane. So picture an airplane going down a runway. And if I take everybody in the airplane and I throw them all in the back, that airplane's not going to have the weight in the back, and it's going to go like this. And so if you're on your foil or you start to go and your foil or your board just goes vertical, that means there's lift happening and you're stalling, obviously. So the front of the foil is lifting, or maybe you're standing too far back on the board, and vice versa. If I take all the people and I throw them into the front of the plane and I get it going down the runway, it's not going to maybe want to take off as much, because all the weight's on the front. I'm keeping the nose down. I'm keeping everything down from taking off. So it's a good analogy to kind of like take a big picture of when you get your foil. If I get out on the water and, like Gwen said, right away, it's going to happen. It's going to buck up on you and you're going to be like, whoa, what just happened? And then there's the opposite. There's people that get on the water and they go, I can't even get the foil ever up. It's never coming up. I don't even know what's going on. And that could be that your mast is all the way in the back and you're standing on the nose of that huge board. And it's going to take a lot for that to come up. Either tons of speed, or maybe you do need to move that foil a little more forward. So just kind of a good analogy is to take a look at an airplane. And that's and I think Gwen said it really well. And that's, an airplane doesn't just take off. It gets its speed up, it gets going really flat, straight, fast, and then it slowly takes off. And it's the same concept of a foil in theory. As you get better, people can do cool things and planes do cool things as well. But I would say in general, it's a good analogy when you look at your foil and when you're feeling it out there. If it's jumping up, maybe maybe I should shift things back. And if it's not jumping up, maybe I should shift things forward. And it's a game of learning that. And it all depends on board size and so on and so forth. But I would say with the wing, I think Gwen makes a valid point. And a lot of people don't pump it up a lot. And the other valid point to just capitalize on that is when you go into the water is usually cold, which you may pump your wing up, and then when you go into the water, it actually shrinks because of the cold. It like makes less pressure. So a lot of times people will pump it up and then they go in the water, and just because of that temperature difference, your wing may get a little bit less pressure. So things to think about. But I would say just in general, I guess I would say put your foil on, talk to your friends, and you're going to go through that beginning struggle, truthfully. I would say the biggest key that could help if you're nervous or learning is a smaller foil mast can be a little more approachable, I would say. I'm not necessarily saying it's better or worse. I'm just saying with a longer mast, if you have a really long mast and you're learning, there's a lot more for that airplane to kind of come up out of the water. So there's more drag underneath the water. So, I would say just an average mast is just a good size to start with. And If you have a super long mast, it may make that learning curve a little bit harder.
Personally, I hate long mast. I think it's the most useless thing. I mean, unless you are racing or you are going like Mach 10 on a big wave. But I think a short mast is gonna help, everybody getting going, because we don't really think about it, but like when your board is in the water and your foil is 10 centimeters, 15 centimeters deeper, it's adding so much more drag, like you said, to take off. And you don't need that much height when you are like on the water. I mean, even with a 75 centimeter mast, you can be so high, plenty high. So I would say shorter mast is always going to be better. And again, like if the wind is like kind of like you are struggling to stay out there, if you have a long mast, let's call it like 90, 95 centimeters, it's going to be annoying because you have to go so much deeper. You have to swim further out. You are back on the beach, sooner. So shorter mast is the way to go, in my opinion. And then to talk about like the wing, it's kind of like the pumps, the manual pumps that we have. It's kind of hard to read the pressure. You push and your gauge is going up and down, up and down, up and down. And now you are like, okay, when am I good here? Am I trying to read the top or the bottom of the gauge? And and so like an amazing tool, it's a bit more costly than a manual pump, but not that much, is an electric pump that is going to stop automatically. And the reason we have hard time reading the gauge with the manual pump is because the pressure input is changing all the time. We push and then no pressure, push, no pressure. But the electric pump is giving a more consistent input, so you have a more accurate reading, and so you also can set up the exact pressure you want, and it's going to stop on the dot every time. So an electric pump is going to help you pump your wing to the most like accurate pressure without making mistakes. What I've seen, if people are scared of like using an electric pump, I've seen some pumps that are like, you can set it up on PSI or bar. And some people kind of like messed up the settings. It's on bar and they put like 7 bars and then your wing is blowing up or something. So just make sure that like it's set up for PSI if you are like entering like say 7, 8, 9 PSI and not bars. But overall, I would say like the electric pump, I think, has been pretty amazing accessory to have.
Okay, so to recap on the mast length, so what would you consider a long mast and what would you consider a short mast for those that are getting brand new into this?
So I would say 70, 75, I would consider it like, short, or, maybe even 65. I actually teach a lot on like 65 centimeters. 80, 85 is kind of like medium. And then 90, 95 is kind of like tall, super tall mast. And so a tall mast, sometimes can help if you are riding in like very choppy conditions. And at that point, if it's very choppy, it's usually very windy. So the extra drag is maybe not so much of an issue because you have tons of power to get up. But more choppy condition is going to make it harder to learn because, it's moving more. So often, I think beginners are finding themselves more in a situation of like not extreme chop, not extreme wind. And in that case, a short mast is plenty.
Okay, so 70 to 75. I guess our next phase, once you pick a mast length, could be potentially looking at your fuse length.
Yeah, that's just a general. I would say, in general, I would say for somebody that's picking, the longer you can have a fuselage, and I say that within reason because there's a lot that can go into foils, and we could go here for like 6 years and talk about this because this is like this is aviation or this has been around forever, but I would say in general, a good rule of thumb is a fuselage length, which is the piece from the front wing to the back wing, the fuselage. The longer that is, usually can stabilize or slow down your pitch sensitivity, your up and down motion of your foil. The closer you get it together, that pitch or that turn becomes more aggressive or increased. Now I say that within reason because you can put tiny, tiny little wings on the back on a really long one, and it's going to have sort of a similar feel as maybe a little bit smaller, but a different ride. But I would say in general, I would say a longer fuselage is not going to hurt you for stability. And in the beginning, you want stability. And I would literally say that I think anybody out there that foils in general, when you learn, you should shoot for stability and you should shoot for ease of use just to get started, because the more time you can get on a foil, the more you can tune it in and you can go into the bigger mass and you can go into all the cool foils and you do whatever you want. But in the beginning, you're just trying to put time on the water. And to me, the best thing is to just, make sure you have enough power in your wing, a foil that lifts you, and conditions that you feel comfortable in. And I think Gwen nailed it a little bit earlier on, the longer mass and potentially choppier conditions. I personally believe a lot of people learning, they choose actually to learn in less wind, because when you see 30, 40, 50 knots, it's like intimidating. That's like I don't know if I really want to go out. Like I like winging, but maybe not. So people choose a lot less than they think. And then even when people see 15 to like 20 knots, some places, that's a lot of wind to people. Like they haven't seen that before. So they're like, whoa, that's like, look at all that chop. Like, so usually it's less than what they perceive. So, the smaller mass and the longer fuselage is just going to give you ease of use and more stability. And that would be my 10 cents.
Okay.
Yeah. What's tricky about when we talk about sizes and aspect ratio and all of that, it's not all equal because there's so many components. So you can have like a bigger foil that's still going to be hard to ride, or you can have a smaller foil that's going to be easier to ride, and a lot of that has to do with the foil profile. So brands usually have recommendation. They have a beginner foil. So I think whatever brand you pick, just make sure that like the foil you are going with is in their like beginner category, because it's hard to talk about size. There are like foils that would be maybe like 1,300 square centimeters front wing that's maybe considered small for a beginner, but if it has the right profile, it might have tons of lift and be very easy foil. On the other hand, you might have like an 1,800 square centimeter foil that's seems bigger, maybe better for a beginner, but actually it's a pretty tricky foil to ride because it's more performance oriented for what it's made for. So just make sure that like you just don't look at just the size, and you pick a foil that was designed for beginners.
Good points. What about board selection? Because I know that's a big one with a lot of questions regarding it. What have you guys seen with that one? Fiberglass? Do you go blow up? Do you go sup? Do you go blow up, sup? Like everything.
To me, I would say I see
most important point right here.
Quite a few people going with maybe trying to get the convenience of a inflatable board. And to me, I kind of like really dislike inflatable boards because I find them harder to ride. They are more sticky, so they get in the way of people trying to get up on foil. And I also, that's in the design of most of the inflatable boards, but they are like pretty, short, super compact. And so they are not even as stable. Even for a massive volume, they might not even be that stable. So I've seen people struggle on 140 liter inflatable boards, and it would be easy if they had a 130 liter board that was not inflatable and that was a better design maybe. So I find that the sport went from I think boards were kind of long at the beginning, then they went super short, and now everything is going back to being long again. So we see it in downwind boards. Downwind. I mean that's talking about the extreme. I don't recommend a downwind board for a beginner, but when we look at the downwind board, it's very long. 7 foot, 8 foot, even more, and very narrow. Yet it's not as tippy as it looks, and that comes from the length. So for beginner boards, I don't recommend anybody, if they are going in a volume of 130 plus, to ever go below 6 feet long. I think that's going to start making the board very unstable, and a bit more drag. So it's kind of like a lose-lose situation. The board I've been using for teaching, which I find, the easiest for most people, is 155 liters, 7.3. And so it's the easiest board that I've found. And length is definitely helping. And again, I feel like foiling went to a point where we all were thinking shorter is better, and now we are realizing actually longer is helping, and it doesn't feel terrible when you ride. So that would be my tips for picking a board.
Yeah, so that's a complicated topic here. This one's a tough one. I would say for the general idea of it, I would say, well, first I would say the number one mistake is most people, the number one question and the number one mistake is, I want one board I can do everything in the future
for the next 10 years.
And I want to make sure I can prone foil, I want a wing foil, I want a downwind foil, I want a dock start, I want to do everything. And I would say for those people out there, you're never going to have it. Yeah, it's just one of those things. It's like any sport. Can you have the cycle bike that goes really fast on the road, but jumps into the dirt and does whenever you put it all together, it's only going to be as good in some areas as it can be. It's never going to be as good as that area specific. So to answer that question, I would say hard to get. But what I would say is, I would say the biggest mistake people do is always go too small. They think if the good guys out there on this size, I'm going to go with that size. So let's just say the local legends are ripping around on, maybe 70 to 100 liter boards. Could you pull it off and could you get there? Sure. Could you spend a lot more time struggling to get there? Yes. So don't be afraid to necessarily, like Gwen said, he's teaching on a 155 liter board. That's ease and fast use to learn how to do the sport. So if anything, make it easy to learn it, as easy as you can learn it, because once you learn it, a lot easier to go downsizing and even that can be challenging. But I'm just saying, start big, start easy, make it as easy as possible in the beginning. And I think that's super important because you could struggle for a long time. I struggled for a very long time. I was sort of in the beginning of the sport, not beginning, but starter in the beginning stages. And I thought you had to be in a hurricane to ride because we were using boards that were like potato chips because that's just what we had. And we just thought, it's literally a hurricane. It's blowing 40. We can do it today, and so I would say go bigger with the board. I think Gwen makes a good point. The industry started with shorter and wider is, if you think about it, it's stable with width, but short makes it forward and it becomes like a like a teacup that wants to roll around, and as you go a little longer, you get more stability. But again, there's a trade-off, because if I go super wide and super long, now I got this huge plank on the water that's very sticky. So it's kind of learning that. But I would say in general, volume is going to be your friend. I agree. I believe. And that would be my sense for when you're picking boards. Do your research in your local area and definitely talk to your locals. I would say we can throw out a million different specs, and we do, and we try to do a general idea. But I would say in general, talk to the locals in your area. But if I were to steer anybody, I always steer them to more is better. More time on. I can have fun riding a bigger board and learn a lot still. I don't have to be on that perfect board that's small.
Now, I know there's a lot of metrics to gauge what is big and what is small in regarding boards. Have you guys seen something like what I've heard the most is about you convert your weight into kilograms, and then it's, let's say, plus 30 or plus 40 per volume per kg to get started? Have you guys seen a number that makes the most sense? Because a 155 liter board might be great for me at 145 pounds. But if they're, let's say, 220 pounds, 6'2", then that 150 might be pretty small. So is there a metric that you've seen?
I would say it's kind of hard, because a lot of it has to do with skills, skill level and experience. So, like you said, maybe, somebody like that's like very tall, very heavy, maybe they have no problem on it. And then yet somebody that's like 130 pounds, it might feel like it's too small or something. So it's always hard to like come up with a rule, and that would apply to everybody, because if you just plug in like height and weight, because skills is so much has a big impact. So if you can try a setup, that would be always the ultimate best. And that maybe that's what you get also when you get a lesson. Often you get to try the gear, and now you have an idea. And so you take your first lesson, you try a 155 liter board, and you are like, okay, that was like way easy, I'm ready for more challenge. Or you are like, okay, that was like it was just good for me, and that's what I need. And so I've seen people that are like really lightweight, and that's still what they need, 155 liter. So it's hard to plug in my opinion, height and weight.
Yeah, I'd second that too, and I would say, I would totally lean on anybody. It's worth the money if you can, even if you're getting better at wing foiling, to take a lesson, to try different setups, or to have somebody assist you and be able to try a different wing that's a different size, try a different board that's a different leader, because it's going to help you narrow it in for your area. And I would say having a general rule of certain kilos or certain pounds of a difference, I would say, in my opinion, I think, there's other things you have to take in consideration, just weight and size. Maybe I have bad hamstrings and I can't get up a certain way, and maybe I can't use this arm because it's the muscle's tough, or everybody has something different. And I just think that your best bet is always still to go as bigger than you can in the beginning, so that you have volume and you have stability. What that is, I would say, is a tricky number to put on it, like an equation.
Okay, so we went over board basics. We're preferring a fiberglass board. Go big, pretty much, or go home and have fun. Foil placement, kind of looking in the center. You're looking for any brand that you want to ride, but it's more so just their beginner foil is probably the safest. Looking between what's around 72 mass to kind of get started. It's a pretty safe place to go. And then wing size. If you're tall, if you're small, have you seen or have any recommendations based on how big or how small should somebody start with picking a wing? And then you got soft handles. the medium kind of handles, and then the brand new, all these kind of hard handles with infinite combinations?
I would keep it pretty simple. I'd say all the handles and stuff, look, they all work. I would say I think booms are the easiest. I would say I would think people feel comfortable just grabbing onto a solid piece, and I'm not saying it is, I'm just saying in general. But I would say all the handles work. So if you have a wing that's handles, loops, I think it is going to more fixed stuff because you feel more solid. You feel the direct feeling between the wing and the wind. But I would say hard to pick a general size, but usually I would say if I recommend a lot to most people, and we live in Florida, conditions are lighter, but we'll just call it, people go out in 15 to 20 knots. I would say a 6 meter is a great size for somebody who's retired, maybe learning. Again, it depends on somebody's ability. But I would say 6 meters is a good size because you have some power. It's not super big. But again, it's again that same question that everybody asks. Can I have that one wing that can do everything? And, I don't have to have the big wing. Can I have the perfect one? But I would say I think a 6 meter for most people to get started is a good size. I don't think you're going to go wrong. You're going to go out in the lighter wind conditions. That's my sort of theory here. Now, if I lived in Hawaii and it was the normal trades, I would say not going to be a 6 meter. So obviously you got to know your areas.
Yeah, I think 5 is also a good size if you are a bit lighter weight. But in my opinion, 5 and 6 is going to be the most ideal to learn because it's in that wind range where conditions are going to be very friendly. Unfortunately, if you learn in a place where you need a 3 meters, it might be, a bit harder just because of the condition that come when the wind is good for a 3 meter wing. Now you can find some spots that are like protected, so maybe it's a bit more flat. But still, when you have like a tons of wind, everything becomes more twitchy. Things happen faster. So I find that like people have like maybe more success in moderate wind, like you said, 15 to 20. To me, that's like the sweet spot. And in that range, a 5 or 6 meter wing, depending on your weight, is going to be perfect.
Valid points. All right, fellas. So we kind of let's wrap this one up. And I think the next time for our third episode, we're going to go into safety gear.
Yeah.
What do you need? Knee pads? Is that a good idea? Like, how are we getting up? How are we getting out there and making sure that we come home and do it safely?
Well, yeah. I mean, I remember seeing Damien when he learned how to e-foil in the bubble, and I saw that was a pretty good idea.
All right, I'm looking forward to getting into it. Thanks everybody for joining us today, and stoked to chat with you on the next one.